Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
Intane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Kia ora, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Baskets of Knowledge. Once again, Tane cannot join us today and he apologizes. He's off supporting his team that are in the league final, which is awesome for him and his team. So good luck to them. But that doesn't mean I haven't learned anything this week. What have I learned this week? This week's learning for me has been more about, I guess, trying to not focus on trying to get the results all the time. I think about the process of how I'm doing things. A lot of times we try and get a result. We're like, oh, I want to do this and do that. And then we have a pretty broken process that the results never come. So it's more about looking at my processes, and which is as simple as how often I check my emails, because that's terrible, or how I do my receipts for work, which is crazy. So, but I think when you extrapolate it out into the world, it goes, you think about the process as opposed to results. But hey, this is not a monologue. As always, we try and bring guests from all around the country and all around the world because we think everyone's got an amazing short story to tell. And we have an amazing guest today. Welcome to our podcast, Rachel.
Hello.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on it.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Rachel, before we start having a bit of a yarn, do you want to tell our listeners a bit about who you are and what you're doing at the moment?
Alrighty, so as Prajesh says, my name's Rachel. I'm 21 years old. I live in Wellington and I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Commerce at Victoria University.
Awesome, cool. That's a great place for us to start, Rachel. So we met 4 years ago or so, 4 years ago, and I remember meeting you because for our listeners out there, Rachel comes from a school called Wainia High School, and it's in a part of Wellington that has got some interesting stereotypes. Rachel, do you want to talk about those, because this is your neighborhood?
Oh, I suppose I could. So we call it Wainui for short. So if you hear me say Wainui, that's what I'm referencing. But Wainui is just a little town in a suburb of Lower Hutt. The stereotypes of Wainui it's quite a bad place. If you mention Wainui to someone from Wellington, typically they think bad things. We're a low socioeconomic environment. We have one high school, we have one intermediate, I think maybe 8 primary schools. We're not very big. I think a population of maybe about 16,000. But yeah, it gets quite a bad rep with crimes and gang violence and all that stuff. So the immediate reaction is, yeah, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah, and the reason why you stood out for me was because when I came to speak to you, there was a passion and I guess a drive for you to want to change your life. And that stands out for me. Whenever I come to your school, I've met some amazing young people from your school, and I guess schools that have got stereotypes that are in the negative sense. But what was your driver? Before I even met you, there must have been a driver for you to say, hey, actually, I want to make a bit of a change.
Yeah, well, I suppose it was just a sense of like seeing everyone in the community. University rates, for one, is not very high in Wainui, so it's kind of this idea that I wanted to further myself. And people from Wainui, it's this idea that when you're in Wainui, you're stuck there. Like, I love Wainui, but it is kind of the idea that you don't want to limit yourself to being in literally the borders of the hill. You want to drive yourself and push yourself to reach out into the greater world and to just extend beyond those stereotypes. You don't just want to become another one of the people who sit on the benefit, or you don't want to contribute to society negatively. Especially our community, the best way to impact society is your direct community, and just by bettering myself and not succumbing to one of those stereotypes is definitely one of the ways that have inspired me to do what I am doing, I suppose.
Awesome. And I guess I'm going to ask you a question which I think most people would like to know is, and for a lot of people in these kinds of communities, you live in a community where this is all around you. You hear about this, you see it. But what was something in your life that made you go, actually, this is not what I want to do? Because it's so easy to just revert to the people that are around you and follow the same pattern.
Well, it's actually the people around me that made me realize that was you do living in a negative society, you do come across some negative people, and you just look at them and you see how they treat others and how they are as a human, and you just look at them and you go, I don't want to revert myself to that. And my parents, especially, like, I would say we grew up to differ to that stereotype. It was, you don't want to be these people, you're better than that. You have more drive, more passion, more brains than that. Like, you can do a lot better with your life. And I think just seeing the way their life has turned out and the negative impacts and the things that have happened to them, it's the exact reason not to do that. It's the drive to, I want to be the opposite. I want to be better. I don't want to revert to my life being like that.
Yeah, and it's crazy because, people, there's no good or bad in people. It's just a situation that people are in. Some people are born in a situation and they can't change that. And you're in a situation where actually I want to change and make an impact. So let's fast forward to, you come to the stage, you're in school, it's time to leave school. And as you said before, university, I mean, it's through no fault of anybody, it's not really pushed. I mean, it's pushed, but it's not a norm. Why was university an option for you? I mean, you could have gone to Polytech, you could have gap year, you could have gone working.
Yeah, so I immediately dismissed a gap year because I knew that if I took a gap year, I wouldn't have gone to university. I would have, fell into the full-time working, traveling. I wouldn't have gone to university. So I knew that I immediately had to get out of high school and go straight into uni. So I knew that was that. I knew that I wanted to do tertiary study before I knew what I wanted to study, and I didn't know where. So, but Polytech was never actually something that I looked at. I'm more of a mental person than a physical person. So Polytech has that more hands-on approach, and that didn't suit me ideally. So I knew that university was the route for me. I love, like, this is a bit nerdy, but I do like reading and essay writing and things like that. That's definitely for me. And when I started looking at what I wanted to do, it was the English, history, social studies, like business, that side of things. And I knew that university was the place that I needed to be to do those type of studies.
Yeah,
so that's totally why I went for uni.
Awesome. And hey, embrace the nerdiness. Dobbish just embrace it. The world needs people to do that. So yay, nerds, let's go forward. Happy days. So now you had a choice. So you came on the trip with us, you had a look at Otago, and you went back home and you have choice. I mean, like we said before, there's 8 universities in this country here. What was your decision-making process around how you chose where you wanted to go?
So honestly, the decision for me was really hard. As you said, there's 8 universities. For me, it was between Auckland, Wellington, and Otago. I didn't like the idea of living in Auckland, so that was immediately dismissed. But it was up to the wire between Otago and Vic, and especially after the trip and meeting you guys, that had set me more to Otago. It got to the point where I made a pros and cons list. Yep. I sat there and did the pros of going to Vic, the cons, the pros of going to Otago, and the cons. And it came down to that. But coming from a low socioeconomic area, financial, there was a lot of financial reasonings behind the decision I made. My family as well, and family history as well was also, there was just a whole bunch of different decisions. But I think ultimately there were 2 main reasons. So I ended up with a scholarship to both Victoria and Otago. With the way that it played out, I would still need more finances to get to Otago, and for someone coming from a place like I do, it would come down to me having a bank loan, whereas at home, being at Vic and staying at home, that didn't happen. But another big factor was my parents, which that sounds quite like I want to cling to my parents, you don't want to branch, but it wasn't for the reasoning of I don't want to leave my parents, I don't want to be independent. It was the situation that I was in, that my parents were quite unwell, and they needed a lot of emotional support from myself and my family. And it was just, if I had have uprooted and moved to Dunedin at the time, it just wasn't the best personal decision. I would have loved to go into Otago though. Regrets a little bit, but but
yeah, but I love the honesty there, because at the end of the day, you have the money, you have all that, but this is important for people to listen to us, or when I have my chats, is it's not just about studying, it's also about life. So it's what you leave and also what you go to. And for you, it's not about being clingy to your family, but actually, hey, wait a minute, I've got one set of parents, and if they're not well, and if you move away with whatever university you chose to go when you left, you would have more regrets about if something
Yeah.
happened to them. So, I always tell people there's no good or bad decision. You make a decision and then you go with it and you go, oh, cool, this is what happens. So, and awesome, well done. I mean, it's awesome for you to do that. And yeah, let's embrace the nerd and let's embrace parents, because that's amazing. So, you mentioned before, history, classics, English, some business stuff there. How did you choose what to study? Because that's always a hard thing to do, right?
Oh, so for me, I looked at it holistically. So I was doing the debate between a Bachelor of Commerce and a Bachelor of Arts. I looked at each degree and looked at what I would pursue within that degree, and then I looked beyond university. I said, where would this take me in the future? What sort of job opportunities would I get from that? Like, what direction do I want to go in? Initially, English and classics and history, I looked at those things because they were the subjects that I enjoyed in school. And then I realized if I did a BA and did English history, logically, the most plausible option from there is to do a master's and to be a teacher. And I was looking at that when we went on the trip. That was something that I was looking into. And then also with commerce, there was all the different, I was looking at accounting at the time, which would lead me into accountancy and being a chartered accountant, that type of thing. But I looked at it and I was like, both those options, post-grad, I didn't want to commit myself to having to do post-grad. I wanted that to be something I made the decision at the time, rather than I had to do that to get where I wanted to go. And also, yeah, I just looked at it, and teaching, you need a certain passion to be a teacher. You need a drive. You need to 100% want to put in the hours and be there for the kids and do everything for the right reasons. And I just didn't feel like I had that drive that teachers need. So I stepped back from that and was like, that's probably not the best option. So I did decide to go down the commerce route. But the one lucky thing with commerce is the first year papers that you need to do are compulsory. So you don't really need to fully decide your major until second year. So I had that saving grace with me.
And that's awesome. And I love how you just broke it right down, because, a lot of people think they know what they have to do at the certain point of time, but the fact that you broke it down by pros and cons and reality as well. And it just touches back to our last guest, Maria, last week, who spoke about she's on a gap year and she's teaching, and she goes, being a teacher is so much hard work. Like, it's the amount of preparation that goes in for a 90-minute class or 40-minute class is pretty crazy. But it's great awareness for you to actually pick that up. And who knows, life can change and you might make a decision later on. But at that point in time, you go, right, cool. So you go to university, which is awesome. You're doing what you're doing. Now, one of the cool things about university or living, going to tertiary, is the opportunities that have arisen for you. So let's move away from study and talk about your opportunities that have arisen now that you've been at university, that have grown Rachel as a human.
So because I did make the decision to stay home while I was at university, we're pushing university aside, and that's exactly what I wanted to do as a person. I wanted university to be a part of my life. I didn't want it to be my entire life. So because of that decision, I play football for my local club. And it also means that I get to work part-time, and I'm balancing 2 jobs at the moment.
Wow, 2 jobs. So, what are your 2 jobs, if you're allowed to name them?
So I work at H&M in Queensgate. So I have the retail side, and then I just work at one of our local fish and chip Chinese shops, that was my first job. And I ended up resigning from there, working somewhere else. And then I've come back there because I just love them with my whole heart. It's the best place to be. The food is great. Everyone's amazing. So back there just a couple of days a week just to help out.
Oh, brilliant. So you're living at home, you have your university life going on there, you have your football, and you have your work as well. And is there anything else that so here's your triangle, I guess, or you're actually a square, I guess, how, yeah. Are there any passions that, when you go to university, you get exposed to all these crazy ideas, which are crazy awesome or crazy not awesome? Has anything started for you that you picked up and gone, hey, this is actually something I really want to grow on a bit more,
I think one thing that I have, my secret little passion since starting university, is learn a lot of essay writing and a lot of grammar and things like that. And I have actually picked up that I do really like writing. So I do every now and then. I haven't posted any of it anywhere and I haven't shared any of it, but I do secretly like to write a little bit and yeah, do some little, I wouldn't say poems, but some little pieces here and there. So that's the other little nerdy side of me.
Yeah, and hopefully you will be brave enough to share that with the world at some point because hey,
Hopefully.
yeah, exactly. We'll work on that at some point. And
Mm.
so and I know you're very passionate about your town. I mean, Wainui, you're very passionate about it. You
Mhm.
play for the football club. You work at the fish and chip shop there. But I'm going to talk about that in context of you as a young female, a young woman leaving there to
Mhm.
go to study and having all these things. So what is that like for your community, the people that are around you? What is the impact been for them as they've seen you done, especially with people in your football club seeing you doing this?
Mhm. So uni coming from a small area isn't that common of a thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, I know in my family, I'm the first to actually have sought out tertiary education.
Wow, that's very
Um,
awesome.
and also just there's there's a stereotype that in Wainui that your life you leave school and you go to work and that's it. And I feel like with the teachers at Wainui, they love bringing in us ex-students who have gone on to university to try and advocate the fact that I will admit university isn't for everyone. A lot of people have decided not to, but I think it is really important that people in Wainui do recognise that the opportunity's there if you want it. Not that you have to go to uni, but coming from Wainui, and I mean myself as proof, that it can be done if you want it. Um, and I feel like there's not that many females or anybody in general in Wainui to be proof of that. In my year group, there was a few of us who have gone to university, but still not as many as I would like. But it's just so important for people in our day and age to recognize that that opportunity is there if you want it,
Yeah.
not that you have to take it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I mean that's true. It's all about opportunities. And I always tell people you don't have to take it, but don't close the door before even trying it,
Exactly.
before exploring that option there. And I feel that lots of people, not just university, but lots of doors, just shut the doors before they even open them and have a
Mm-hmm.
bit of a sniff. Think of what's going on here. Is it a good smell or a
Mm.
bad smell? I don't know. And we go from there. And football's been a big part of your life. How long have you been playing
Mm-hmm.
football for?
Or about since I was about 11, so
Yeah,
about 10 years now.
yeah,
Yeah, I was quite a late bloomer in the game, but yeah, about 10 years now.
yeah. And that's a huge passion for you, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a developing passion as of recent. I was a midfielder, and in the last 2 seasons, I have been pushed into goalkeep. So it has been interesting learning a new position and finding myself in that position. But it's definitely been a welcome reprieve from uni and life and everything. I do really enjoy it.
Awesome. And your team, are they made up of similar age young people or a whole cross section of?
Mm, so because Wino is quite small, we only have the one women's team. Last year we had quite a mix. So I was the youngest and I was 20. And the oldest mid 40s, I think. But coming into this year, it's quite the main demographic is 20-year-olds. So most of us are between 20 and 30, but there's a couple of older ladies in that team. But it's wonderful getting to play alongside them.
Yeah. And what does it feel like when you as Wainui go out and play the main city clubs? Because again, the stereotype follows you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sad fact of humanity that these things happen. What does that feel like?
It's honestly a bit frustrating at times because it really does. It's hard because we're a team where we're there because we have the passion for the sport, and being from a club from a small area in general, let alone a club where we're females, the only female team in a predominantly male club, we lack the respect from inside the club, and then we lack the respect from beyond the club as well. Um, like I'll admit, we're not the best team in the world. We're not a Premier League team, but we're a bunch of ladies who are there to have fun. We're there to train. We're there to have a good time, get fitness, be social, all those type of things. But especially when we extend beyond Wainui, that's become apparent because there's all these teams that are supposedly our level in our division, but have received way more resources than we have because, quite frankly, we don't have the money, we don't have the ability to acquire those resources, and it really comes across on the field.
Yeah.
Just in the fact that we'll be in the same division, but the team we're facing will be a team from the middle of town, and it'll be full of 18-year-olds. And when we have late 20s, older women on our team, there's biologically no way we can keep up with them. And it's hard because we know that if we were a team that had the same level of resources, we would be able to get those type of players in. But the matter of the fact is we don't have those resources. So we just, stuck in the place that we are, and it kind of sucks, and it's made worse because we're women, and it's bad.
Let's I want to talk about two things. The first thing I'll talk about is that you all play for passion. Like you play for passion, you have a good time, which is awesome. But another thing I want to talk about is, because I know this about you, is that tell me, and I know this is a thing that you're also passionate about, is how females are treated just generally in the sphere of life, I guess, in your world.
I'd like to say that it's the 21st century and sexism doesn't exist, but the truth of the matter, the fact that I'm from a low socioeconomic area is 1 point against me. The fact that I'm a woman is a second point against me. I'm just lucky that I don't have a third point, and that my third point isn't because I'm a woman of color, and that's the privilege that I do have, is because I'm lucky that I have only 2 things against me, not 3, because I'm white, and I'm happy to stand up and say that. But focusing on the female part of it, it's just, especially when you go to a place like Wellington, where the central Wellington high schools are typically, to put it in perspective, Wainui was a Decile 3 school when I started there. I think it got downgraded to a Decile 2 at some point, but Decile 2 and 3. A lot of the schools in Wellington are 8, 9, 10. A lot of these people that you come across at uni are people who've come from up north. You find more commonly it's people from Auckland, Taranaki, the Bays, those type of areas, where the socioeconomic areas are better off than Wainui. So there's automatically this sense of privilege to them. And I don't want to talk down on those people, but this is just something that I've observed. And along with that privilege is the opinion that a man is better than a woman. And it's a bit bullshit. Sorry if I can't swear.
You can say what you want. You can swear, you can do what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit bullshit that it comes with those privilege, comes along with those sexist values.
Yeah.
And what I find is it's not intentional. It's not blatant, obvious sexism. It's not people standing up and saying, I think I'm better than you because I'm a man. It's these things that are ingrained into society. Like case in point is you'll walk down the street, then you'll walk up Landon Quay. As a female, I'll walk past men and I'm the person who's expected to move. It's just the little things like that that's so blatantly ingrained into society that it's just hard. It's hard because you'd like to say it's the 21st century, we're more aware of what's going on, but when you have these older generations that don't have that same mindset, you feel like you're just never getting anywhere, and it's just, all I can say is that it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and this is really interesting. In fact, I don't appreciate that because I don't know at all, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that comment there. My colleague actually told me this comment here, and it just blew my mind. She said to me, she speaks about color, like you spoke about color as your third no tick there, which is great for you as a young person. So she said to me, I can never talk to you about racism because I've never experienced racism before in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way is that you can never ever talk about sexism because you never faced it in your life. And I was like, that is such a true thing. So there's no way I can say that I can imagine what you go through because I have no idea. In the same way that you can't say you know what racism is in the context of racism in the world. So it's quite frustrating, and it's quite hard for everybody to say, oh, I understand, and then do nothing about it, but actually to go, wait a minute, I don't understand. You need to educate me and teach me what it is, because and I think that's where the difference is, if people get educated and actually say, I actually don't know, then things change. But what happens is we pretend to know. And then when you pretend to know, you just don't, you just think you're doing the right thing, but actually you're doing the total wrong thing. So yeah, it's a crazy world, in any of those isms, any of the isms, sexism, racism, xenophobia, all those things are just a whole different crazy world. But let's talk about the positive side. So now this is happening. This is obviously this is something that you're really passionate about. The fact that you're from a low socioeconomic place, and you're a female from there. You have a drive, and your drive is to change that. And how do you see your vision, if you want, with change? What would you like to see? Oh, actually,
Well,
I'll rephrase it. What would you like to do? I know this is a harder question, but what's your drive there?
Well, it actually links in perfectly to my studies. So one of my majors at the moment is human resource management. So one of the things that made me decide to go into HR was I hated accounting and I needed to change my major. But it was also, I was looking at what was available and I was like, what do I want to do? And obviously you want something that'll keep you financially stable. But the main part of it is the horror stories and my experience in the workplace with A, businesses not having HR, and B, the stereotypes around HR themselves and how HR are normally run by old white men. And there's these women in these workplaces that are getting sexually harassed or bullied by their co-workers, but because they're females and their HR is male, they don't want to go anywhere near it. And I think that that's a dynamic that needs to change. As females, we're just as valued in the workplace as males, and we should be treated and feel as such. And one of the things that I want to be able to do is change it from the inside, basically, is to enter in any firm. I don't know, I haven't made my mind up as to what specific industry I want to go into yet. But I think it's important for me to enter into a firm that either doesn't have HR or has, I don't want to say corrupt, because I think that's a pretty extreme word, but we'll just say corrupt HR, and go in and be able to make it a place where these females can bring forward their claims and issues and any harassment that's going on. And because the key to a lot of things is your workplace and your workplace well-being, and you need to be able to be happy at work to be able to be happy at home and in life. And to be happy at work, these things need to change and need to be enabled. And they're not to say that that doesn't exist in some workplaces, but I find that workplaces that do exist with good HR and it's comfortable for women are few and far between. And I feel like that's something that definitely needs to be changed.
Also, you want to go in and shift the dynamic to make it a fair. I don't know if fair is the right word to use, but just to make it, it's okay, it's normal. Like it doesn't matter if you're male or female. If you're having a bad day, this is it. If you're having a good day, this is it. And males have their things they've got to worry about, and females have things they've got to worry about. And that's going to be taken into account. And I can't wait to see what happens. Now I'm going to ask you controversial questions. We don't really do that on this. But why not? My controversial question is it's tied to this topic here. In the last week or so, we've had this crazily. We've had how the media has basically spoken ill of the Finnish prime minister for going out. Have your time, whatever, who cares? What are your thoughts when you see that? Because of just what you've said right now and the passion, what does that make you feel like?
I know exactly what you're talking about. My first instinct when I saw that picture was, would we have the same reaction if she was a man? Because at the end of the day, she is the prime minister, but she is entitled to separate work and personal life. And by taking those pictures and you're delving into her personal life, and just because she's doing that in her personal time doesn't have any effect on how she's doing her job, doesn't have any effect on anything. As long as she's not doing anything illegal, who cares? She's having fun. How are you going to say to this rando walking down the street that they're not allowed to have fun? No, you're not. So what's the difference between that rando walking down the street and the prime minister? It's the fact that she's a woman, and if it was a male, nobody would have batted an eyelid, would have cheered her on if she was a guy.
Celebrate, right? Yeah, celebrate. It's I mean, like I said before, we live in the 21st century, and you would hope that we were in a different space, but it just shows that actually the cultural narrative is still, unfortunately, hasn't changed. I mean, individual narratives have changed, people in the individual lives have changed, but the problem is the cultural narrative, which is put through by media for clickbait, right? For clickbait and people to go to create controversy is still out there, which is quite sad. It is quite sad. And as you said before, people. I mean, before that, nobody actually really cared who this person was. She was doing her job, having a great time. Now she's in the limelight for the wrong reasons. But actually, there's no such thing as the wrong reasons. She was having a great time, but the way it's been painted.
Yeah.
So it's really quite sad that the world still does that and will continue to do that until things change. And people like yourself make those changes as you go to HR and tell people what to do. So you have this, and with your commerce program, you're doing that. Are there any clubs and societies that you've got involved while you're at university, or have you been so busy in your square that you're like, nope,
No, if I'm being straight up honest, no. Like
yeah.
Between uni, I did contemplate that.
Yeah.
I contemplated joining the football team at university. But then ultimately I decided to keep at home, I've been established in that club for a while, so stick to my roots. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite an introverted person, so clubs,
Not so much. That's fine.
not really my thing, no.
That's all good. That's all good. But what I do want to ask you is, you made the choice to stay at home, which is all good. What is that? I mean, I'm sure you have friends at university, because I'm sure you're not that much of an introvert, who have gone through the whole experience. Do you reflect and go, hey, it would have been a very different university journey? I'm not good or bad, just a very different university journey. Do you ever think about that?
100%. I feel like being someone who didn't come through the halls, it's ironically, a lot of my friends at university are mature students. I tend to go to, I don't know why, I just have quite a few mature students as friends, but when students come through the halls, it's not that they form a clique, but they've already made friends amongst themselves, and they've been through O Week and established themselves in these halls with these people, and 9 times out of 10 you'll find someone who's doing your degree in your hall. And so when you come to classes, they've already got friends, and it's kind of hard to like insert yourself into that group. It's definitely like an easier way to make friends. For myself, first year was a bit of a shit show because that's when COVID hit and everything got put online. So I didn't really have any uni friends first year because, you're doing university from your bedroom. And it wasn't until second year when you got back and you were like, hey, I recognize you from my class last year and I recognize you from my tutorial last year. That's when I started making those connections. And then it was, oh, you're doing that class next semester? Oh, yeah, go sit with them. And that's when you make those, that's how I made those connections anyway. But I feel like if I had have gone through the halls, those friendships, especially with COVID, would have been more existent. It's because of COVID, you're stuck in your hall and your bubbles. You would have had to make friends, otherwise it would be super isolated. And then those friendships carry into second and third year. So by second year, I feel like that's why I ended up more towards with the mature students, because they're outcasted or whatever, which I find shouldn't be. They're great people. But I ended up going more towards them because it's kind of like who's sitting here alone, who isn't in a group, because as I'm an introverted person, I'm not going to walk up to a group and introduce myself. And in the same regard, they're not going to walk up to me and introduce themselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like who's alone and who needs a friend. And that's kind of what happened. Is one of my friends I walked up to and introduced myself, and another friend vice versa, she walked up to me and introduced herself. So it's definitely with halls that initial connection is easier to make, and then once established it carries through. And coming from someone, especially with COVID, it was a bit more difficult, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting story there, because humans are creatures of they want to find a tribe. Even if we're introverts, we still want to find a tribe. And as you said, when you move into a hall of residence, wherever you're in the world, you're automatically set. Your tribe is set for you. You have the physical boundary there, and then you just find people within there. It might not be everybody, but you're gonna find your tribe in there. But for someone like yourself, and for mature scholars who don't do that, it becomes much harder, and you've actually got to put a bit more effort. And I guess, like you said, then you start finding people that are similar to you, as opposed to just living in the same physical environment. And there's there's no good or bad. It's just the way the world works. But it hasn't stopped you. It hasn't stopped you from having a wholesome university experience. And I think people have got to realize that the halls are one part of university, but they're just one part of university. There's a whole lot more that happens at university than just whole life. And how is given you said that you were the first in your family to go to university, what does your family think about that? Because this is, especially given, first in family is always tough because there's lots of fear. There's fear about why you're going to university. There's fear about, well, there's also fear as well. There's also the pride of going to university. But sometimes the two clash, especially when things start getting tough. When things get tough, fear always trumps pride.
Yeah. So that was, I think it was for me a lot smoother than it could have been.
Brilliant.
So I'm the youngest of three girls. And my parents going through school, I wouldn't say we're smart, but we didn't struggle in school. We were quite comfortable. And
it's because you're
my
a nerd.
parents,
that's why.
It is. But my parents were definitely all for, they definitely encouraged us to go for tertiary education if we wanted to, but they definitely weren't the kind of parents that said, we're going to be disappointed in you if you don't go to university. But it's definitely been hard being the first, because especially with COVID, a lot of it's online. Most of it's in person now, but especially when a lot of it was online, my parents and my sisters saw they saw when I went to work, and because I worked part-time, that was a couple of days a week. But beyond that, I was at home in my room, and in their mind, that was, I'm just at home in my room. They didn't connotate that to me doing assignments, and it was like, I'd never see you do an assignment. It's like, it's because I'm in my room doing it. I need the quiet, And it was quite hard for them to grasp the workload that I'm actually dealing with. Especially, I mean, they're seeing it more now that I'm going onto campus 3 days a week. But beforehand, it was really hard for them to understand, and because I never really complained about the workload, because time management is something that I pride myself in, so I had it under control relatively okay. But it was definitely hard for them to realize, because they sit there and they're like, why are you tired? I'm the one who works full time.
Yeah.
And then you have to think about it. Well, the hours that you spend working full time is the hours that I spend on university, and then I'm working part time on top of that. So if we're doing it by hours, you realize that I'm actually working more hours in a week than you are. But it's just, especially because in their mind, university is you go to class and you go to tutorials and that's it. They don't consider the amount of time that you spend on readings and doing assignments and catching up on lectures, or all that stuff. So that was the aspect of that was hard for them to grasp. But beyond that, they were quite pleased when I said I wanted to go to university, because my parents were like, we know that you're capable of that, and we know that you're capable of more, and you can do great things in the world. But in this day and age, a lot of the things that I wanted to do and wanted to achieve had to be guided by a university degree.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do any of that without a degree. So that was definitely the first stepping stones. And they were quite supportive of that idea. And they were supportive in the idea that in this economy, they had resigned to the fact that I was going to be at home until I finished university. So their way of support was not forcing me to move out and making me leave and being like, when are you going to leave? Like they knew the minute that I accepted my enrollment and started university that I'd be at home until I finish. And that's their way of showing support, is giving me somewhere to live and not kicking me out.
Yeah.
But they've been overall pretty supportive.
Which is really cool. And I like how you broke that right down. The fact that they had never been to university, they have no idea what the workload is. They have no idea. They have no concept at all. And even for some people to go to university for the first time, if their family been to university, the family know, right? Hey, it's going to be hard, blah blah blah. Even though you might not have, might not expect the workload, but you have nothing. You're going on a blank slate. So there's two blank slates going in the same place, and one blank slate is staying blank because they have nothing. They have no compass to go from, and you're just growing, which is a great breakdown because I didn't even think about it that way. So thank you for sharing that because that's a great thing for me to reflect on. But also I like how you just broke it down and said, hey, support doesn't have to be physical, a verbal support all the time. It's just the small things, and the small things are just normal, like living at home. That's an amazing support right there, which some people require support to be in their face the whole time, and you're doing a great job, fantastic. And it doesn't have to be that, it can just be the small things. So that's really awesome, and awesome that you have a partner that does that for you, which is brilliant. Something came into my mind, but I forgot what it was. Oh, this is the beauty of podcasts. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me at some point. We've been speaking for almost 45 minutes, which is great. Yeah, it was your birthday two weeks ago. Last week, wasn't it? Or 2 weeks ago? Or...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Happy
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
And as you had your birthday and you reflected about it, you saw the people that came from all around to celebrate with you. Were there any thoughts that came to your mind as to where you are at this point in time, given where you've grown up? Did anything stand out for you?
Okay, this might seem a bit negative, but yes, definitely. So, all through high school, I had 3 friends that were like my rock solid, and beyond that, I had like what you would call acquaintances. Like, if I walked past them, I'd say hi. I would like have no problem having a conversation, but neither of us would go out of our way to see each other. Naturally, because it was my 21st, you still invite those type of people, and you get the messages of, oh, I'll do my best to be there, and that's quite a disappointing feeling when you get to the day and none of them show up. But then you have to step back and realize, and you're like, look at all these other people who are here for me. So obviously all my football team came, all of them came. There was all my family, uni friends, they were all there. The high school friends was the one disappointing part. And I think that's the one thing that makes you realize, especially when you get to university, it's kind of that first step out of high school for a lot of us. A lot of the university students fresh out of high school haven't really experienced the world that much. And we think that these people that we went through high school with are the ones that we're going to grasp onto forever. And for some people, that's the case. Like my best friend, we met in year 9, we've been best friends since then. And sometimes you just click. Like I say, she's my soulmate in every way, because we just click. But when you get to like a situation like you're 21, you're 3 years out of high school, you've had the opportunity, like I had workmates there, I've had a couple jobs now, so I've had different workmates there. And I think that's the moment of realization of, it's also not how many people you have, it's the quality of the people that you have. And like I'm quite close with everyone who was there, and I think that was the more important part for me, is I think quality friendships over quantity of friendships, especially all the way through high school and things like that, because you compare yourself to the people who were friends with the whole year group, and you look at them now and they don't talk to anyone. And I think that's the realization of, well, I've got 3 friends here who are my best friends in the entire world, and I would like tell my soul, bare my soul to them. And I feel like that's the moment where like, I've done something with my life. Like I'm doing good, because for you to sit there and say you have people that you're happy to bare your soul to, and they're happy to do the same, that's like the moment. I feel like making it in life is beyond making a lot of money. And obviously I'm only 21, I have a lot to go, but at this point in my life, I'm quite happy with where I'm at, if that makes sense.
100%, that makes total sense. And I love how you broke that down. There's 2 things that I want to pick up on. Number one is, initially you were focused on the people that were not there, and then you changed that to the people that were there. And it's a lot of times in our lives, all of us do this. We focus on the stuff that we don't have and forget about the stuff that we do have. So obviously gratitude is really important. So I love how you brought that up. But it's normal for us to do that. Your first reaction is, oh, they didn't come. But then you focus on who did come. And the second thing is quality over quantity. Now, I know how you mentioned that about friends, but I I learned about this a long when I was at university, and I remember someone saying to me, if your mantra in life should be quality over quantity, and if you put that in every aspect of your life, it actually resonates really well. I was like, oh, what are you talking about? So quality friends versus quantity, but also quality food versus quantity of food, quality clothes
Mm-hmm.
versus quantity of clothes. When you think about that, you go, okay, cool. This
Mm-hmm.
is really interesting. So those two things are things that you can take, which you have just shared and broken down, but they can be shifted to any part of life. Focus on
Mm-hmm.
what you have, not what you don't have, and quality versus quantity. Boom, and things can change for you quite dramatically. So thank you for sharing that and how you broke that out. Um, quality conversations here. Amazing. Um, and I thought we'd rush this conversation, but actually we haven't rushed this conversation because we've been now speaking for almost 50 minutes. But what I'd love to do is I'd love to ask you, these are the hard, well, we have, I'm going to change this format a bit. Normally I ask one question, but I'm going to ask you two questions.
Okay.
The question number one is, I would love you to share any words that you might have for anyone that is from Wainui that might be listening or might listen to this about what they want you to share to them to, how they can break the stereotype.
Mm. I think a big part of it is don't look at the people around you and look at what they've become negatively or positively. Just observe it and don't make that mean that you can't do that or you should do that. Look at what you want to do and realize that just because we come from this environment that tells us constantly that we can't do it and that we shouldn't do that doesn't mean that we have to listen.
Yeah.
We need to realize that just because we were born without these resources and we were born into this environment that naturally lacks these resources doesn't mean that we can't find them somewhere else. Doesn't mean that these things aren't supplied to us from somewhere else. Just because we don't have it at the moment doesn't mean that we can't find it somewhere else, doesn't mean we can't reach out for it. Don't let what we think we should become stop us, or think that we're going to become naturally stop us. Don't let you be defined by what you think the community expects of you in a positive and negative light. For example, just because your sister's cousin's friend says that you went to Wainui High, you're just going to live on the dole for the rest of your life. Don't take it to heart, because that's something that they say about a lot of people. Look at what you want to do and realize you can do better things. If you want to, if you want to, and there's people there to support you, whether or not that's your family or friends. But there are resources available that'll help enable you to get where you are. If I didn't have those resources, I wouldn't be where I am. And just because we were born without those resources doesn't mean we can't source them elsewhere. That's what I would say.
Awesome. And I'd love to extrapolate that out to any community that is seen from an outsider's world as being a community that is that has so low social economic barriers. Because it's not just Wainui. There's a lot of places in this country and around the world where they have the same exact same thing that you're going through with a different name. Thank you for that. The next question is the question we ask all of our guests, and it's probably the hardest question that most of us tell us this. Our podcast is called Baskets of Knowledge. And to end this podcast, I'd love you to share one piece of knowledge you'd love to share through your experiences of your life that you would love our listeners to take on board or listen to, I guess.
So like a piece of advice, because I have
you just one piece of advice. Yeah.
So I actually can't take credit for this. My dad said it to me a while ago, and I feel like this is applicable to work, to home, to clubs, to uni, to everything. That if you don't enjoy it, if you're not having fun, if you're not happy, why are you doing it? And if you're not happy with it, what are you doing to change it? And like, I'm not happy with the stereotypes in my community. So what am I doing to change it? I don't like this. What am I doing to change it? If I do like this, leave it as it is. But if you're not happy, why are you letting it be?
That is so beautiful. And like you said, as you pre-framed it, this can be applied to anything. If you're not happy with something, what are you doing to change it? What a great way to close our podcast today. Thank you so much, Rachel, for this really fantastic chat. We've gone all over the place, which is really good. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure listeners will have enjoyed what you shared today. And I look forward to seeing how you're going to bring that change into the community, but not just your community, but also in the world around you. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to us. As always, feel free to share, like, comment this podcast. I'm sure you know people that are in the same situation as Rachel or her community. I'm sure they'll learn something from it. So share away, because that's the way we grow. We love to share the knowledge. Thank you very much, everybody. Till next time, take it easy. Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge. Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your baskets of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.